The second aspect is finding the time to write. One of the biggest complaints about writer's block is basically saying there just isn't enough time in the day. And that's a valid reason, but there is a way to go through and carve out the time you need. One of the main things that's helped me is Julia Cameron's Artist's Way. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way, gosh, I think in the early 90s, maybe late 80s. But basically, it's a 12-step program for recovering your creativity. So she gets into a lot of things that we might have already talked about with the creativity side of it. But one of the time management things that she has is called morning pages. And it's very similar to Natalie Goldberg's automatic writing, but what Julia Cameron says is instead of a time period, she uses 3 pages. So in the notebook, with her morning pages, she says, get up first thing in the morning, before you have coffee, before anything else, turn on the TV to see the news, any of that. Sit down with your notebook and write 3 pages, longhand, not stopping. So very much like the automatic writing, except she wants you to do it in the morning and do 3 pages. And again, it's lots of times you just end up doing, I don't know what to write, I can't think, it's too early. Then I tend to make lists of things that I need to do that day. So it's a good creativity thing, just like automatic writing, to get it out of your head. But for the time management, it's the morning that's important. A lot of people push back on this, and the reason is that we all have morning routines, and that's the genius of this, is that she's pushing these pages, this time, into your morning routine. Lots of times you're like, I've got too much to do, but you can find that time. And I have, if you have to get up earlier, that's okay. If you have to cut back on the morning TV or checking the internet, social media, cut back on that. This is much more important to have that time for yourself first thing in the morning. So if you really can't do the morning, then find your own time. There is, when I first did Julia Cameron's Artist's Way, I think it must have been in the early 90s. And I just couldn't do morning pages. I was, I was in my 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and I couldn't do mornings. What I found was doing it in the evening worked for me. Also, look at your own time. I found that if I took my lunch hour and brought my lunch, I would sit at my desk and write for an hour. And that was a time that was already carved out for me. And instead of socializing or going over to the cafeteria or going out to eat, I would spend it in front of the computer working on my book. Also, when I lived in Sedona, Arizona, Arizona does not do daylight saving time. So during the summer, the sun was up at 5 a.m. So that was good for me because by that time in my life, I woke up with the sun. So I would get up and do whatever I need to do. I'd go running, and then I'd come back, and I still had like an hour and a half before I had to go to work. So I spent that time working on Under a Copper Moon and getting it finished. So that was helpful for me. So find your own time. If morning pages don't work for you, then try lunchtime, in the evening, after everybody's gone to bed. That might be the perfect time when the house is quiet. Spend 45 minutes, an hour working and writing before bedtime. Next, you want to make sure that you claim that time and communicate with everybody in the household that you're working, that you're not sitting there on your phone, going through social media, that you are working on your project. Lots of us are afraid to say, I'm working on my book, because that sounds pretentious. Just say, I'm working on my project. And with if you've got spouses or business people, they understand that. They know how important project work is. So just say you're working on your project and that you can't be disturbed. That's a big thing. One thing you might want to do is, if you've got a home office with a door, shut the door. If you need to put a little sign on it that says you're working, so nobody knocks on it, that's good too. If you don't have a physical space where you are, find one. You know, go to a coffee shop first thing in the morning or after work and spend your time writing. Go to the library, you know, make it a daily thing. You go to the library after work, you go to the library at lunch, you go to the library before work, and spend that time working. If that doesn't work, then go for a walk, find a park bench, and spend your time there outside. Another part that really helped me find the time was a deadline. I found that I work much better when I have a deadline. From 1988 till 2003, I was part of a critique group in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I lived. And the great thing about a critique group, besides giving you feedback and encouragement with what you're working on, there's a deadline. We met every 2 weeks, and if I came to several meetings and didn't have anything, they held me accountable. They're like, what are you working on? Where is it? Bring it in next time. So they gave me a deadline, and I felt responsible to them to bring the next chapter in. And that was something that worked for me. So if you don't have a deadline, if you don't have a critique group, set your own deadline. Tell people, tell your family, tell the people at work, say, I'm working on my next chapter and I'm going to have it finished by the end of the month. And even if you don't show it to them, they'll expect it. And it's easier to get it done than come up with excuses as to why you haven't. And then the last thing about finding the is give yourself a break. It's like a diet. If you fall off the wagon, don't beat yourself up. So just drop the guilt. If you've told yourself you're going to get up and write for an hour every morning, and 2 mornings you sleep in, that's okay. Maybe that's not the best time for you to do it. Maybe you need to do it at lunch. Maybe you need to do it after work or at night. But it takes a while to find the right time for you. But drop the guilt. Again, if you skip a day or something, then it's all right. You just get right back on it. If you're staring at the page, you've blocked out the time and you're staring at the page and nothing's coming, then go back to the creativity part we talked about and coming up with ideas. Maybe you go for a walk alone and think about what the next steps are in your plot. Go back to the bubble graph. You've come to a dead end. Let's explore some of these other tracks that you can go on. That will help. I mean, if you've got the time set aside and the ideas aren't flowing, then go back to the creativity part and look at different ways you're plotting your story. So it is okay to go ahead and say, okay, I've missed a day. I was going to do this every day. I'm only doing it, twice a week. Then step back and say, is there a different time that would work better? Because it's all customized just for you.